Lawmakers were hopeful last week, but there's still no vote scheduled on President Joe Biden's signature proposals after Democratic Senator Joe Manchin of West Virginia put the brakes on it. Take a look.
Simply put, I will not support a bill that is this consequential without thoroughly understanding the impact that it'll have on our national debt, our economy, and most importantly, all of our American people.
And joining us to talk about the Build Back Better bill and much more is Illinois senior U.S. Senator Dick Durbin, who serves as the Senate Majority Whip and chair of the Senate Judiciary Committee. Senator Durbin, thank you for being back here. So you heard Senator Manchin there. President Biden says the votes are there for both the infrastructure bill and the social spending bill. Congress has vowed to vote this week. Manchin's still skeptical. Are there 51 votes in the Senate for both these bills?
Yes, I think there will be. And we have to work through a long, involved process involving the House, the Senate, the moderates, the progressives. The Republicans are all up in the bleachers watching, but I think we've got a good chance to get both bills done.
And Senator Manchin says he still thinks there are gimmicks in this bill. He still doesn't quite understand its impact on the federal deficit. What are the things that you think need to be ironed out for him?
Well, I'm not sure. I talked to Joe just 2 hours ago about the immigration issue, which is one that I care about a lot, and it's very important to a lot of senators and congressmen. We're trying to find some common ground. We have several problems. First, reconciliation, the name of the process, is very specific on what is allowed and what isn't allowed. Second, there is a gatekeeper involved in this, and that is the Senate parliamentarian who can give thumbs up or thumbs down to any piece that's put in there. And third, we've got to find something that truly does help and solve the problem. We haven't had a major change in our immigration laws in 35 years, and we desperately need it.
I think you need to clarify that because you're talking about, you've written there might be a backdoor way to have some kind of residency status for undocumented immigrants as part of some of these economic bills. Can you explain that?
Well, I'll try. There are three proposals in the Senate. The first two I won't go into in detail, but they were rejected by the parliamentarian. The third proposal is an immigration visa known as parole. It has nothing to do with criminal proceedings whatsoever, but it's called parole. And it says that the people who are eligible for it once applying would be able to live in the United States, though they're undocumented, without fear of deportation. They would be allowed to legally work. They could travel outside the United States and return. And if they pay their taxes, they're entitled to the regular benefits that comes with those who live in this country.
And you said you just spoke with Senator Manchin about that, and he's skeptical of so many parts of these social spending bills. Is he on board with the immigration proponent here? Because it sounds like that could add a new wrinkle for some legislators.
Well, it wasn't my first choice. Pathway to Citizenship and the DREAM Act and that sort of thing. They were in the first two things we submitted that were not accepted. I'm not going to go out on a limb and speak for Joe Manchin, but we have an ongoing conversation about this issue. He voted for comprehensive immigration reform when we passed it in the Senate several years ago. So he's on the record for immigration reform, and those who are critical of that idea have a vote that he's already cast. So I'm asking him to stick with us now to get the job done with something that is very positive.
And back to the rest of the substance of Build Back Better, what exactly is in here for Illinoisans?
Oh boy, in terms of help for our state, a lot. Let's start at the obvious. This notion of giving additional 3-year-olds and 4-year-olds additional years of education is dramatic. 250,000 kids in Illinois would benefit from that. In addition, the idea of daycare being available for those people across our state, 750,000 kids could be eligible for that. The notion that we are going to extend the tax cuts for children that has cut child poverty in half in our state affects dramatic numbers. I don't have the exact number on that as I sit here and talk about it. We have climate change legislation included in this, which I think is absolutely essential. We cannot ignore the obvious. The world is getting into a dangerous state because of our greenhouse gas emissions. And I'm going to the Glasgow, Scotland conference. Many of us believe that we owe this to our kids and grandkids to get it right.
Specifically, what are the climate provisions that are still in there that will, in your mind, get 51 votes in the Senate?
There are a lot of incentives for businesses, individuals, homes, and homeowners and such to do the right thing, to move in the right direction. And if they qualify for these incentives, they're going to move us toward having an economy that's not driven by the fossil fuels. The notion is to cut in half our dependence on fossil fuels across America by the year 2030, not that far away, and to try to have net zero when it comes to greenhouse gas emissions in 2050. That is a global goal. Some countries are serious about it. I think the United States should be. Some are not serious and have to be convinced, and sadly, that includes China.
And one of Senator Manchin's big concerns overall with the bill is how exactly it's paid for. How exactly is it paid for in a final version that'll be voted on?
I'll be very blunt about it. Joe Biden has said we are not going to increase taxes on people making less than $400,000 a year, period. And we have stood by that as the basic guidepost when it comes to raising revenue. But if you are a wealthy individual, a millionaire or a billionaire, if you are a profitable corporation and you're not paying your fair share of taxes, you're going to hear from us. We think these folks ought to be accepting the same responsibility that the average family in Illinois accepts every single year.
Also today, Senate President Chuck Schumer announced a major piece of voting rights legislation will be put up for a vote, and announced there is one Republican on board, Senator Murkowski from Alaska, but you'd need at least 9 more to break a filibuster and actually move forward. So what's likely to happen with this bill, the voting rights bill?
Well, we'll fall short of the 60 votes that's necessary. The Republican filibuster will prevail. But give me a minute to praise my friend Lisa Murkowski. She called me from Alaska on Saturday, or Friday or Saturday, and to tell me that she was going to join us. This is significant. There was a time when the Republicans were as supportive, if not more supportive, of civil rights than the Democrats, and that's back in the 1960s. But now the tables have turned, and for some reason, Republicans are not interested in the Voting Rights Act. She is breaking the mold and stepping forward, and showing a lot of courage in doing it, and I want to praise her for doing that.
You know, a few weeks back, your Senate Judiciary Committee put out a report about January 6th, saying that, quote, we were half a step away from a constitutional crisis. There's been a lot of reporting that confirms that very notion, and more that comes out every single day. So my question to you, what is Congress poised to do to prevent an actual constitutional crisis where an attempt at overturning the results of election is successful?
Well, first let me say that we want to make sure that we have a clear record of what happened January 6th. There is a committee underway. Adam Kinzinger of Illinois, the congressman, Republican congressman, and Lynn Cheney are both on the committee. It's a bipartisan effort in the House. I support it. But it should have been a bipartisan commission that did this, as we have in the past over 9/11 and other issues in our history. The reason we don't have this type of commission was Senator Mitch McConnell, the Republican leader, said, I won't participate in it. Well, that troubles me because I was with him on January 6th when we were taken to a separate location. And I know how upset he was. He didn't feel happy about the outcome on January 6th any more than I did. But now he doesn't want to get a record made. That's unfortunate. So in the meantime, what can we do about it? Well, at first, it lies in the hands of the American people. They have got to elect presidents who respect the Constitution. This last president, Donald Trump, first went to every court in the land and was thrown out because he had no evidence of voter fraud. Then he turned and tried to take over the Department of Justice, which we showed in our 400-page analysis, and was unsuccessful in doing that. And when that failed, he called for a rally and turned the crowd loose on the Capitol. Now, that is the kind of irresponsible, unconstitutional conduct that we as voters have to make sure never happens again.
And Senator, we interviewed Robert Costa, who wrote that book with Bob Woodward, talking about the Eastman memo, basically a blueprint for a vice president sending the vote back to state delegations and having states send alternative slates of delegates. So how do you prevent that kind of situation? It certainly seemed like a blueprint if folks in bad faith wanted to execute that kind of plan.
We were damn lucky, let me be honest with you, because this president was bound and determined not to give up the office, even though he clearly lost the election. And though everyone who's looked at it has found maybe an error in votes here and an error in vote there, they're so small, so minuscule. After $5.7 million was spent in one county in Arizona, they ended up finding more votes for Joe Biden. And that was exactly the opposite of what they were looking for. So let me tell you, we better be careful as a nation that we choose women and men to serve as president of the United States who respect the Constitution and don't go off on an ego trip and destroy this democracy on us.
Senator, closer to home, you questioned Attorney General Merrick Garland last week about violence in Chicago. You know, many presidents have sent extra resources to the U.S. Attorney's Office here to take on gangs, to bring RICO cases, to take on gun cases. Still, Chicago suffers a high violent crime rate. Is there anything else that you believe that the Justice Department should be doing?
Well, the gun violence situation in Chicago is intolerable. People, as one of the aldermen said, are fed up, and I'm one of them. To think what we are allowing as part of one of the greatest cities on earth is just unacceptable. So I had a closed-door meeting last week with the federal law enforcement agencies, and they briefed me on what they're doing. It's good. It's very important work. It doesn't match the resources of state and local law enforcement. They have to lead in this effort, but we need to complement them anywhere we can. And I want to say the report of the U.S. Attorney's Office this morning about the RICO case brought against the West Side drug gang that is supposedly involved in some 20 homicides is the kind of action I want the feds to take on. We've got to complement any state efforts to do the same and make it clear that this gun violence is unacceptable, even if it is happening in some areas of the state and not in others. We're all in this together.
That is a recent case that the U.S. Attorney's Office put out. And speaking of, we interviewed the U.S. Attorney John Lausch just a few weeks ago. He was kept on when most U.S. attorneys were changed due to the change of administration. You and Senator Duckworth wanted to keep him in the interim. Do you anticipate he'll stay on for the remainder of this current presidential term?
There are over 90 U.S. attorneys, and I think maybe 2 were retained. John Lausch was one of them. Senator Duckworth, and I believe that he is involved in sensitive, protracted litigation efforts against individuals, high profile. I won't go into names and places, and that they should be allowed to complete this investigation. John Lausch, I might add, was considered to be U.S. attorney when Barack Obama was elected president. So I think he fits it in terms of his lack of political bent, that he is a professional, and I believe he's doing a good job. I hope he makes some timely efforts in terms of those investigations.
Seems like that he will be there then for the foreseeable future. And there are big investigations, as we've covered on this program, so I think our viewers get the picture in terms of what you may be talking about. And Senator Dick Durbin, thank you as always for joining us.
Thanks, Paris.